Yo, so I'm going to dive right into it. You see what I'm saying? And I'm going to dive right into it, and what steps that you need to get to actually even start trusting the process. So I dive right into it. Step number 1 is identifying. You have to realize that everything isn't for everybody. You see what I'm saying? And your experiences will only expand your perception on life. So what does that mean? In order to start something, in order to start the process, in order to start trusting the process, you have to have something to trust in. You must identify the goal. You must identify your dream. You have to understand exactly what you're about to be intentional about and purposeful about. And that's one of the hardest things to do, especially in this social media age. I remember especially, like, it's even hard for me now with so much information coming at me, with so many tactics on how to get rich or how to get wealthy. It's kind of hard identifying which goal or which vehicle that I'm going to use. You see what I'm saying? Every day you're bombarded with different, okay, yo, you can do this. Yo, invest your money here. You know, buy this course. And then you got your family and your friends, and they're like, yo, you know what you should do? How many times in your life have you heard that? How many times in your life is somebody close to you like, yo, you know what you should do is, and it's kind of easy to get distracted. It's kind of easy to get off course. But first you have to identify what you're about to be intentional about, and purposeful about. What is the goal, right? But your only way you're going to find what that goal is to experience, right? The same things that I wanted in my early 20s ain't the same thing that I want in my later 20s. The same thing that I want in my later 20s hopefully won't be the same thing I want in my 40s, because life is about progression, right? But in order to progress, I have to actively be seeking a goal, right? I have to actively be engaged in this process, right? So number 1, find out what you want to do, and then do it. As my mentor says, find out what you want to do, then spend the rest of your life trying to do that. If it's you want to go back to school, right, to get your degree. If you want to finish your high school diploma, right, figure out what that is. If you want to start that new career, right? If you have dreams and aspirations of owning your own business, figure out and identify what you're about to trust and go on that process with. And it's not easy. Trust me, it's not easy. You know, I used to go through a million things a million dreams, right? But after a while, you just have to start weeding those out and listening to the universe. And if it feels right to your spirit, then it will become right. See, and the beautiful thing is, like, the law of attraction says whatever you put out there in the universe, you will receive back. So once you start putting out their intentions on finding what your goal in life is, your goal will reveal itself to you. It's beautiful to talk about how you want to raise your kids, but if you don't have kids, it's beautiful to talk about what you would do if you went to school. But if you're not in school, right? People talk about the body they want to have but never go to the gym. This is some true stuff. I had somebody come up to me this is true stuff. I can't make this up. Somebody came up to me the other day and said, hey, I'm trying to lose weight. Can you tell me? I said, yo, you might want to start with going to the gym. They said, nah, I don't do the gym thing. So you're not listening to me. I had somebody come up to me the other day and said, hey, I'm trying to lose weight. I said, hey, you might want to slow down on fast food. And then they proceeded to give me every reason why they needed fast food in their life. You have to have tunnel vision in this process. You have to have the mental fortitude to tell yourself to be quiet. I don't know how many times that I got in the way of my own self, that I got in the way of my own blessings, that I got in the way of my own riches. So many times did I stop myself before anybody else could. You have to lock in. It takes a discipline. And it's not something that you can get overnight, unfortunately. A lot with discipline, with learning discipline, is breaking down the thought processes that has been ingrained in your muscle memory to make you think the way you do. It's some childhood trauma. There's some things from your past that are stopping you from reaching your future. You can't even think a certain way. You can't even have the self-confidence in yourself because the low self-esteem that you gained as a child. That's real. I remember when I was about to leave the military and things like that. And for anybody that's ever transitioned out the military, then you know how difficult it is, because after spending so long in a place, you become institutionalized, right? You know, your mind is programmed to wake up at a certain time. Your mind is programmed to think a certain way. But when you're transitioning out of the military, you are essentially breaking that connection off. You have to rewire your thought process to think a new way. The last time, for a lot of us that left the military, the last time we even thought that way was when we were teenagers or really young in our 20s, because we joined at an early age. So for the most of your adulthood, you've been brainwashed or institutionalized or fed a certain way of thinking about life, right? And if I didn't develop new thought processes, if I didn't develop a new mentality on how I was going to target my life and target my future, I would have never made it. That's honest to God. Honest to God. I had to have a tunnel vision on what I set out to do. It's not easy. It's definitely not easy. It was ingrained in me to think a certain way. But when I stepped out of the military, then life required that I change my perception of this new world I was coming into. So they say that horses, when they run, they have to put blinders on the horse, because as the horse takes off down the track, if even for a second it takes his eye off and looks in the stands, if even for a second you take your eye off the goal and you start looking at social media, or you start looking at what's going on in somebody else's life, that moment you start to do that, you will never be able to finish the race. We know that life is a marathon, and a marathon is just one big race. You have to be able to lock in, have tunnel vision in order to finish, trusting the process. Step three is one of those steps that is real to me. You have to have a burning desire. If you can see it in your mind and you can hold it in your hand, that is one of the closest things that resonates with me most, is having a burning desire. I remember when I first got out of high school, and you're fresh out your parents' house, 2 or 3 years down the line, and you finally got your own place, right? You got your little apartment, and I would be kicking it with the homies, and I never left my home city. I was still in Jacksonville, North Carolina, and I would watch all the kids that I went to school with on social media, and I would be watching them You know, they be posting pictures of them at their college, and, you know, they be joining fraternities and sororities, be out partying, you know, living a life. Or, you know, I used to see people, they was in the military, people all over the world. And inside, I started to get sick inside of my body, watching other people on the path to success, right? Because I had hit a point in my life where I said, yo, this ain't for me anymore. You know, this ain't what I want out of life. And I started to develop anxiety and depression. It's crazy because the places that I used to go and the people I used to hang out with, the clubs I used to go party in, those same places that once gave me freedom started to be my source, started to be the source of my anxiety and depression. I used to go to the club, and I used to have the time of my life. But as I got older, I used to go to the club and I would start to develop anxiety because I just knew that this wasn't where I was supposed to be at in life. I wasn't able to sleep. You know, I would have nightmares. The nightmares would be me being stuck inside of my home city and not going further in life and not living up to the potential that I knew that I had. And a lot of us, and I used to, not a lot of us, I used to try to convince myself that the anxiety and depression that I felt wasn't real. I used to try to convince myself that anxiety and depression was just a part of life. But what I'm here to tell you is that sometimes there are mental diagnoses and mental illnesses that cause anxiety and depression. But there are worldly factors that cause anxiety and depression. You see what I'm saying? We know it is proven that everything in this world vibrates at a certain frequency. We know this. If you had a device that could read frequencies, you could put it at this chair right here and see that it is vibrating at a certain frequency. We know that happiness vibrates at 528 hertz. We know that enlightenment vibrates at plus 700 hertz. We know this. So what I'm saying is there's been times in my life where I was vibrating at such a low frequency, but the universal God that we served had a purpose on my life, a calling, an anointment on my life. And the vibration was at a frequency that demanded me to vibrate higher than what I was doing. And because of that, it caused a sickness, a biological reaction. Because the universal consciousness that we are all connected to knows what our purpose is. It knows what our potential is. It says that God is limitless. So by those standards, if I was made in his image, then my potential was limitless. So when you start to hit peaks, or not even peaks, when you start to hit these glass ceilings in life and you start to feel this anxiety and you start to feel this depression. I had a homie come to me the other day. He's like, yo, I can't even sleep at night. I was like, that's the universe telling you that you should be doing more. That's what it is. When it's hard for you to wake up, when you start feeling hopeless, those are negative, low vibrating frequencies. Because the universal consciousness that you're connected to knows that your potential needs to be vibrating on a higher frequency. And if you are not, then it causes a biological, a physiological, a psychological reaction. Come on. It causes that adverse reaction where you start to poison. Come on. When you are not vibrating on the frequency that the universal consciousness needs you to be at, then it causes an adverse reaction inside of your body. It causes a physiological reaction inside of your body where you start to physically poison yourself. Toxins come out of your body in the form of anxiety, in the form of depression. Come on. So we know that these things are true. That is the level of desire you have to have. That's the level of desire you have to trust the process. You have to trust in the process with that level of desire to where you can't sleep at night, to where every conversation that you have is about your goal. Every conversation that you have is about your dream, that you start to attract people who talk like you, who walk like you, and the people who aren't on the same mentality or the same level as you just start to run away. That's the level that you got to be at. The fourth step is planning. Is planning. This is a quote from the book, The Richest Man in Babylon. And it says, our acts can be no wiser than our thoughts. Our thinking can be no wiser than our understanding. Come on. I'm going to let that sink in for a minute. Another quote. Free men look at problems. A free man looks at problems. A free man looks at problems as something that needs to be solved. But the slave mentality allows the problem to be the reason why they're enslaved in the first place. You have to plan. You have to draw this out. You have to write this on paper. You have to write it down. You have to write this down and then look at that plan at least 3 times a day. You have to actively be engaged in changing this plan. A plan is like a budget. And for those who work part-time, you know what I'm talking about. For those who know that they money ain't always going to be the same every month. You know, you got to change that budget around. You just can't stick to the same thing. You can't spend this much money on food that you spent last money on food, right? You know this. You know, this money you could go out to eat with, but you know next month that same money might not be there. Your plan is like your budget. It has to be flexible and it has to be able to grow, but you need a solid foundation to even stand on in the beginning. Come on. They say a free man looks at problems as something that needs to be solved, but the slave mentality looks at the problem as if that is the reason why they're enslaved. Nothing that has ever been created on earth hasn't been on purpose. People just don't build freeways unless there is traffic. People don't build homes unless there are people who need shelter. Nothing is done on accident. So you cannot continue to attack your dreams and attack your goals like you're living on accident. You can't do it. These things are not accidents. You have to format a plan, a blueprint that is going to be able to take you to the next level. You have to write these steps down. You have to find certain people in that same industry who have done it before you. Get their advice and add that into your plan. And if something's got to go, then something's got to go. It has to be flexible. And especially for me, like anytime I want to start out, the first place I go to? YouTube. You know how many experts there are on you? There is no, in 2020, 2021, 2022, there shouldn't be no reason why you can't find advice. You can't find a blueprint because we have YouTube. There's a million people trying to give free game away. Now, you have to discern who's really about that life and who's putting on a show. But trust me, there are some people out there that's giving away free game. When I bought my first house, it was because I was listening to Jay Morrison. Real talk. Because I listened to Jay Morrison, and he said that owning property was the number one vehicle to obtaining wealth. I went out and I bought a house. But before I bought that house, before I bought that property, I looked it up. I did the math myself. And I said, dang, why would I continue to pay somebody else rent when I can pay my own mortgage? Why would I continue to pay a rent that costs the same amount as my mortgage, but I know when I go to sell this property that the value accumulated over time